Hey guys, this is John. Welcome to another edition of Climbing the Tactics Training Ladder. You guys know the drill by now. I'm solving chess tactics on chess.com, focusing on accuracy, taking my time, looking for forcing moves and analyzing them thoroughly. I encourage you guys to follow along with me. If you'd like to solve the problems on your own, I'd suggest pausing the video right as the problem comes up before I say anything so my thought process doesn't influence yours. And with that, let's get started. I'm at 1980 and hopefully we can make a push over 2000 today. So c3, black is down a lot of material. We've got this nice pawn on b2. I want to give a check, but after king takes b2, how does that work out? Do I have some sort of forced mate? Rook b2 check, king takes a1. That doesn't appear to work. So checking, if I check king takes b2, do I have time to play rook over to a7? That sets up a mating net that is very difficult, if not impossible, for white to parry. I think that's the answer. Yeah, I don't see how white's going to escape. King c2, going to d1, doesn't work at all. So that must be the solution. And if check king c2, I just promote, and that's immediate checkmate. So kind of a quiet move, rook a7. Yeah, and white's pieces are uselessly placed. White can't even deliver a check after I set up that mating net. So let's go ahead and do this. Rook over to a7. Yep, queen takes g4, but rook down, checkmate. Okay, so two rooks working in concert can be deadly, and especially if they're aligned on the same rank or file. And that's what we see here. You pretty much know that this has to be a checkmate, or at least some gargantuan win of material for black, because black is down in the initial position. White has a queen. I guess black has, a rook and a bishop for it. But given that the b2 pawn is likely to fall very soon, we know that black must be playing for something big. And we can't allow white a chance to get counterplay, like the bishop here is under attack. If white could ever get at d5, that would be great for them. So just following the forcing moves leads us to look at rook a1 check right off the bat, most forcing move possible. There's also bishop f5 check, but knight takes f5 would be the answer there. So check and take. And it'd be tempting to abandon this line, but we have some ingredients that suggest that there could be a checkmate lurking. You know, like bishop a3 check is almost working. King takes a1 would be the answer there. So we need some extra piece in the fray to deliver mate. And getting that rook over seemed key. So even though this is a quiet move, rook a2 is impossible to defend against. Okay, so next problem. Queen e4. So we've got this bishop on b1 that is lined up with black's queen. So I'm looking at discovered attack straight off the bat. Material-wise, black is down the exchange, but has two pawns to show for it. So can we trap this queen? What if we play rook d1? That attacks the queen. It also guards h1, because that is a flight square black would otherwise utilize. He doesn't have any checks that can disrupt us. So I think that must be it. Rook d1, and where does the queen go? I don't see any good squares. There's checks on h5, f5, but again, they don't concern us. Okay, let's do that. Yeah, and this is just going to lose a rook for black. Take this rook at the end. So the queen being in the center of the board and subject to attack by white's pieces, that was a giveaway here. And the very first thing I saw was the bishop on b1 being on the same diagonal as the queen, with the rook only being in between. And there's no other rook move we can make that also will cover the h1 square. And this bishop was already defended by the rook, so I guess I could have looked at other moves like rook d4, rook c3 or something. But in all cases, the queen escapes here. So sometimes, I mentioned before, you have to work backwards when solving a chess position. And here, if we identify that h1 is one of the only safe squares that the black queen can go to, our thought process will be geared towards taking away that flight square for the queen, and we will happen upon rook d1. Good move to unveil the attack and cover the square. Okay, next problem. Queen g4. All right, so black's king seems pretty safe, but if I can get my knight into f6, that would be a nice fork. So knight d5 threatening knight f6. Is that too slow? It's hard for black to defend that square, is it not? Because knight d5, it's possible to play queen h4, but Maybe I have rook h5 then, attacking the queen and still forcing knight f6 on the next move. That's going to pick up the queen. I know, they can take with the pawn. I still get knight f6 check in, but is it worth a rook? So knight d5. And the reason why I'm thinking about a slower move, knight d5, I don't see any threat that black has. Queen g4 isn't threatening anything in particular. Black's rook is attacking b2, but we have that covered by the queen. So I can get away with a slow move if necessary. So knight d5, queen h4. There's also g3. I was thinking about g3. But that rook h5 threat is very interesting to me. Just wasn't quite panning out. The pawn on f4 would be double attack too after knight d5. So knight d5, queen h4. Let's say g3. g3 is a normal looking move. Black would have to play queen all the way to d8 in that case. Rook e7 maybe? I feel we're close to winning with knight f6 being possible there. So in that case, do I even need to throw in g3? Should I just play rook e7 straight away? Knight d5, queen h4, rook e7 threatening knight f6. Could be effective. Seems like the knight is key. I don't think the queen and the rook are going to get the tactical job done here. Can we trap this queen? h3, queen g3, rook c3, something like that. h3, there's always queen h4, however. So I think it is probably knight d5. And if knight d5, f5, or f6, rook e7 is crushing with check. So knight d5, queen h4, what am I going to do then? That's just the remaining question. Rook e7 or g3. I like g3 a little more, I gotta be honest. Queen h3 then? Maybe queen h3 is annoying. So I'm not playing knight d5 straight away because I want to have my follow-up in mind before I do it. Knight d5, queen h4. Still trying to make rook h5 work too, but it just doesn't seem to do the trick. Rook e7 is, I think, lights out. That attacks the bishop. We're still threatening knight f6 with various discovered attack potential. Okay, I think I'm going to go with that. So let's go knight d5. And problem solved. So it didn't even challenge me to find a follow-up. That's a little frustrating because I feel like queen h4, the problem should continue. Let's explore that. So knight d5 threatening a check on f6. And we're trying to lure black's king into the line of fire with the queen on d4. If we can get the king to go to h8, it's going to be lined up right with that queen, and black is subject to all sorts of discoveries. So black must cover the f6 square. And they can do that only with queen h4 or f6 or f5. But f6 or f5 is going to fail because of rook e7, followed by this next move. That's crushing. So I would think that the problem should continue like this. This is the only defense. And now, initially, I thought this move was going to kill, hoping for queen takes h5, knight f6, but that's a little bit of hope chess. Black can play g takes h5, and even though knight f6 still looks attractive, after king g6, it's not clear cut. Maybe we take here and continue, but probably better would be this move I was proposing, rook e7, attacking the bishop, which is now undefended because the queen is no longer on g4, and still trying to go knight to f6 check. So let's say something like bishop e6, give a check here, and then black's king will be dragged into the line of fire. They'd have to play king h8, because if king here, there's knight h5 double check, followed by queen g7 mate. So king h8 would be necessary, and then it's a matter of just figuring out where to put the knight. Probably there's a lot of good squares. Maybe just knight d7 and go after the rook, although king g8, maybe he could claim some compensation. Knight h5 or knight e8 come to mind, although This perhaps defends. If I take the bishop, black can take the knight. So where's the win here after king h8? Maybe rook takes e6 is killing. So rook takes bishop, pawn takes, and then knight h5 check. Yeah, this is the way to do it. And then if king g8 or king h7, we're mating on g7 with the queen. e5 doesn't change anything, we take it. So black would have to block with something on f6, and we can take and be up a piece. So not sure about that problem. As we've seen many times, sometimes we come across problems where the solution is either too complicated, or more often, they cut the solution short. That's been the bigger problem, in my opinion. Like, you'll be calculating this line that you think is critical, and the tactics trainer is just satisfied after 1 or 2 moves, and you're like, well, why did I spend all that time calculating a 5 or 10 move line? Okay, let's proceed. We're at 1996. Okay, so white's covering d1. We're very much loaded up on the d file. Knight takes c3, pawn takes, rook takes d1, queen takes, rook takes d1, bishop takes. So in that transaction, we're losing a knight plus 2 rooks, but winning a rook, a bishop, and a queen. That's quite a bit of material. Yeah, knight takes c3, because if we play knight takes f4, he plays bishop takes f4, and simultaneously defends d1 with another piece, the other rook. But knight takes c3, on the other hand, just does the trick. And if knight takes c3, rook takes d7, we're taking on e2 with check, so this has to be the solution. Yeah, go take that guy. And it's just carnage. Okay, so getting the move order correct, I don't think it's rocket science to see that black has pressure down the d file, and you therefore would look at knight discoveries. Knight takes f4, knight takes c3. You just have to discern the difference between the two. Those are the two most forcing knight discoveries because they both attack the white queen on e2. Any other knight move would be bad, actually, because all the other squares are covered. So once again, the problem with knight takes f4, if that was the move that you thought about, then you probably overlooked that after bishop takes f4, white's rook on a1 is helping to defend the rook. So black does not win material out of this. They just lose material. All right, and with that, we are officially over 2,000. Let's keep going. Black's king is in the center. Always a big indicator that a tactic might be present. We do have to watch our own king. So we moved our f-pawn. This bishop is shooting into our position. So taking the pawn on e5 seems incredibly obvious. What's the issue with that? Because if knight takes e5, queen takes e5, check. That's a fork on the king and the rook, and also the bishop on c5. Is there some sort of issue with that move? We're also threatening knight takes g4. So if knight takes e5, maybe queen e7 is going to be the reply. But then we have knight takes g4, queen takes e2, knight f6 check, in between move, saving the piece. Otherwise, if we were to take the queen, they could reply with bishop takes g4. So I think that's working. Just checking to see if there's any disruptive checks black has, like knight f2. Yeah, nothing that's going to concern us too much. Let's do this. Yeah, so now it's important that in this line, when black takes here, because otherwise they would just lose a piece, we get this check in to save the knight. The knight was hanging on g4. So we had to see the line through to completion. So I think in this one, the initial move, knight takes e5, is not hard to guess, but working out the mechanics of it and confirming that the discovered attack potential against the king on e8 and also our ability to refute queen e7 is making this whole idea work for white. So if black were to take on e5, just to illustrate that line, knight takes e5, we play queen takes e5 check, and that's a triple attack. King, rook, and bishop here. Black can't simultaneously save all those pieces. Any other lines? Again, I was just checking to see if something like knight f2 is working, but take, bishop takes, and here we don't even have to go for the bishop. We can play discovery, knight takes c6 check. Good pattern to know. And we win the queen. So proceeding down the main line here, take. And if you just cut your calculations off here, you'd be doing yourself a disservice because you need to see that after queen takes e2, you're not just taking the queen back, which allows bishop takes g4, but you're playing knight f6 check, saving the knight. That's your material gain in the position. and white's ahead a piece. Next one. Okay, so more firepower down the D file in this one. Potential back rank threats. Also potential mate threats against the white king along the second rank, maybe. If we could get at f2, that would just be checkmate soon. Rook d1 is not working. I'm thinking about queen f5 simply attacking f2. White would have to play rook f1 in that case. But I don't see a good follow-up. Rook takes f2. What about that one? That threatens mate on g2, so white has to take it. Rook takes f2, king takes f2, rook d2 check, chasing the king out. Then white's going to have to play king e1 or king e3. And then we can continue with queen takes g2. And we're very close to mating them. We've invested a rook for a couple pawns to get that far, but we're very close to checkmate. We're going out on a limb slightly with that line because black has a nice position as is, but this could be the way to cash in. Rook takes f2, king takes f2, rook d2 check, king, let's say e3. I think that's probably the only move. King e3. Then I could play queen g5 check. That might be the most forcing one. Queen g5 check, forcing the king to a light square, either f3 or e4. Then we take g2 next move. Yeah, that's going to be mate in a couple moves. So I'm going with this line. Check. Let's see where white goes. They do go there. Okay, so queen g5 is the move I want to play. Just double checking. I think it's the most forcing. Queen takes g2 might also work, but yeah, I like this one more. Defend the rook, king f3 or king e4 forced, and then we're taking on g2 next. So we passed. Let's take that line a little bit further. So rook takes f2. White must recapture because they can't do something like queen takes d3 due to queen takes g2 mate. So they got to take here and then check. And if they go back to g1, it's mate on g2. King f3 or king f1, it's queen takes g2 check. So king e1 or king e3 are most natural. If king e1, queen takes here, and we've got dual mate threats on f2 and e2, that's winning. White can't cover both of those. Notice all of white's pieces are on the back rank, just standing there uselessly. So king e3, queen g5, and now the problem ended. But let's say king f3, queen takes check, and then let's say king back to e3. A mate I saw can occur like this. And king f4 is going to be pretty similar. I didn't exactly calculate king f4, but just seeing it now, like g5 check is working with a very similar idea. There might even be a faster mate, but that's one easy one. Okay, I like that problem because it's not immediately apparent that rook takes f2 would be the idea. You'd mostly be looking at stuff on d1, maybe trying to get the queen attacking f2, but the rook sacrifice requires work to validate. So, okay, next problem. Rook takes c4. Black's king is open. Looking at checks on h8, also h2 with the queen. This could be a move order thing, which one to play. It's probably a check move. These pieces are far-flung and undefended. So if rook h8 check, rook c8, queen h2 check, I guess black has e5 blocking. So I kind of like queen h2 because if e5 in that case, we do have a rook takes e5, which looks crushing, attacking the queen, threatening discoveries. So queen h2 is taking some priority in my thought process. Black would have to play king c8. Rook c7 is going to lose to rook h8. So king c8, rook h8 check, king d7. We're chasing him around now. Queen h7 check. I feel that must just end up in a mating net. Yeah, we're going to get a rook to c8, skewer his rook here. That's looking very promising. So just double checking now. Rook h8. I'm not liking because of rook c8. And then if queen h2, e5. But queen h2 first. King c8, rook h8 check, king d7. And then probably queen h7 check. If, let's say, king d6, rook d8 check. Yeah, and then we're getting something to c8. it's going to be too much. Okay. And they choose this defense, e5. So I think against this one, it's just easiest to take here. Black has nothing against our king, so rook takes e5. Yeah. And black has given up their queen. Move order problem, once again, deciding between the two checks, rook h8 and queen h2, and trying to discern the difference between the two. So with rook h8 to begin with, this at first sight looks very good, but e5 is going to kill white's fun. And white would probably trade rooks and maybe be slightly better. Black's king is always a little more open than ours, but nothing major. Black actually does have a pass pawn, so I don't even know if we should trade rooks here. So transposing the move order and playing queen h2 first does the trick, because now e5, as you saw, is met by this, which kills. So king c8 was the move I was mostly looking at, and now rook h8, black's king is getting flushed out, and black's king will not survive this. Let's say king d6, give a check here. I made the mistake of thinking black could not go to e5 in this case, but I think even if they do, it's probably just a matter of time. Check, let's say, and if the king is driven forward, at the very least we can check and go win the rook. You wouldn't want to calculate till mate here. You could if you saw a mate, but calculating enough to see that you're going to pick up a rook is definitely sufficient. Likewise in the line with king to c6, then rook c8 check I saw was most likely working. Unless they can go here. Oh no, they just lose the rook there. Yeah, so they'd have to play king b5, so queen takes b7 was something I saw. And the rook again falls. Next one. Ooh, this looks like a fun one. Common mating pattern. A queen on h6 threatening a mate on g7, which is guarded, and also queen takes h7. This is just a forced checkmate. Yeah. There's nothing deep to this one. Now rook takes h5. Thanks to the bishop on d3, black cannot play g takes h5. We got 8 points for that problem. Weird, because that one is very easy for this 2000 level, I think. Just following the forcing moves, nothing complicated. So, yeah, this is a thematic sacrifice when you have a pawn on f6 and a queen on h6, because that will often drag a defender. Your opponent has to put something to guard against queen g7 mate. And as a result, their poor king on h8 is boxed in. So you can often, having lifted a rook to the 4th rank, like white did with rook f4 whenever that was played, you can set up queen takes h7 and rook h4. And the only thing left to realize here is that when black plays their intended defense, bishop h5, you can take it, and our bishop on d3 pins the pawn. Another fun one. We've got various windmill ideas. So we could go windmill up a storm. Rook takes d7, king g8, rook g7, king h8, rook takes c7, go take a bunch of pieces. Note that after rook takes d7 check, black cannot play rook takes f6 because of rook e8, which leads to mate. So that looks very good. We can windmill everything along the 7th rank and then go take the rook on a8 at the very end. I would probably just do that in a game if I was under any sort of time pressure here. But because this is a tactics problem, I'm looking for something like a mating net, just real quick, spending some time. Don't know if there is one. Rook f7, king g8. He's controlling g5, so we can't ever play a rook over here. I'd like to play rook h5, rook takes h6, but this bishop is undefended. Yeah, so the windmill and then eventually taking on a8 is going to win. Let's do that. And then you got to throw in this check just to force the king back to h8. And then we're doing this again. Picking up everything in our path. Check. And we solved it. We didn't get to eat the a7 pawn and then win the rook on a8, unfortunately, but that's how the problem would have concluded had it been a full solution. So just to show that, king h8, rook takes a7 check. Remember, black cannot take there on f6 at any point because we're going rook e8 and then mating him like this. So rook takes a7, king g8, and then take here. Too much material. Bishop takes e4, so we can take on h3 check and force the king to g1. What happens after that, though? What's our follow-up? So queen takes h3, king g1, maybe take on e4 then, attacking the queen, because I'd like to play pawn f3, but if I play pawn f3 right away, they can play bishop takes f3. So maybe taking on e4 followed by f3 immediately thereafter. I see they have a check on c4, but we can play bishop e6. So queen h3, king g1, d takes e4. Note that our queen defends the bishop here too. If queen takes e4, f3 is game over. So queen c4 check or queen b3, bishop e6, and I think that's also game over. I think white will have to give up their queen to avoid a mate. Yeah, I think that line works. Maybe knight takes f4 somewhere could derail us, but at minimum, we win a piece in that line. So let's go ahead and do it. Take this guy. Yep, he gives a check. Now we win time by attacking the queen. And we're going to put the pawn in on f3 and mate on g2. Okay, so forcing move to start. Queen takes h3 check. Looks to me like white's bishop takes e4 move was a blunder. Maybe overlooking queen takes h3 or just underestimating it. But I don't think white would want to allow that under hardly any circumstance. So check, king g1, take. Yeah, and if queen takes there, then same problem for white, f3, setting up the mate on g2, to which white has no defense. Only delaying tactics like knight f4 and queen takes h7. So in the problem, they gave a check on c4, but bishop e6, and same issue with f3 coming. So queen and knight in close proximity to black's king, hence we might look for smothered mate ideas. Also, this queen is only defended by the rook, and I see we can play rook d8 if we want to deflect the queen, or deflect the rook rather to win the queen. But if rook d8, rook takes d8, queen takes c6, we lose the bishop on d1 at the very end. And then king h2, this rook is loose. Also, we're threatening a check here. That might be good. Let's say rook f8, queen e6, king h8, knight f7. Then black would have to give up their rook. Is that enough to win, though? I'm not sure about that. Seems like there should be something easier. So I'm going to keep rook d8 in mind for the time being, but I'm also going to look at other moves. So maybe queen e7 or rook takes g7. Let's follow rook takes g7. That just might be mate. Rook takes g7, king takes g7, queen e7, check. Aha. And then if the king goes to h6 or h7, it's mate. H6 or h8, rather, it's mate on h7. King g8, queen f7, queen takes h7. That's much more forcing. I like that a lot more. Is rook takes king h8 anything to be concerned about? We could take here. Yeah, he's not going to survive that. No way. Okay, let's do it. Problem solved. Only got 1 point, but I spent a little time looking at that other continuation. Rook d8 check. Very tempting. Maybe black can even play bishop f8 here. But then we take on c6, rook takes, and rook takes a8. So the main continuation I was considering was this. Whether white can win with the queen against the two rooks, and also various threats against black's open king. Like, say, rook here. I was looking at queen e6. I guess this move's also possible. And then knight f7 check. But this leads to some sort of technical position where white might win, but the solution is much easier. Rook takes g7. No way out for black. So if king takes, check. And let's say king g8 is just a mate in 2. Check. Take here, for instance. Also, if king h6 or h8, queen takes h7. Okay, next problem. So what in the world is going on here? White's up a lot of material, but their queen is stuck on h8 for the time being. So why can't I just play knight takes f3? I don't understand, because knight takes f3, there's no queen takes e2 mate. It's covered by the knight. So is the idea knight takes f3, bishop h6? Because then it looks like I can take on h7, attacking the bishop. Maybe they go knight d4 then. Knight takes d4, pawn takes d4, queen takes h6. They take on c3. That's a little dicey, but I feel like I can still defend even there. What else would it be other than knight takes f3, though? Knight takes f3 seems too obvious. Our queen is not getting out anywhere else. I mean, maybe we could play queen takes h7 right away, but it's got to be knight takes f3. Knight takes f3, bishop h6, queen takes h7, knight d4. Let's look at that line one more time. Knight takes d4, pawn takes d4, queen takes h6, takes c3. I can, for instance, give a check on h3, king to b8, queen f3. Black's running out of ammunition. We're up 2 pieces there. Our king is still in the open, but that can't work for him. Okay, let's play it. f5. Okay, didn't see this coming at all. I'm confused. What is the threat? Just bishop h6 now. Okay, so now they're going to try to go bishop h6, now that the queen is covering h7. So I can go knight d5 and try to prepare a route for my queen to escape all the way back to c3. Oh, no, I can't. I get mated on e2. Let's not do that. Okay, so this is a harder problem than I thought it would be. What else could we do? We could play d3, and then maybe after bishop h6, give up the queen. Queen takes e8, queen takes e8, bishop takes h6, and claim that we have so much material for the queen, it doesn't matter. Maybe queen g8 is the simplest here. Queen g8, trying to escape along the light squares. Yeah, I think with the queen coming back to probably c4, that should be straightforward. So queen g8, bishop h6, let's say queen c4, even reinforcing e2 in the process. Then we don't even have to give up the queen. Don't have to mess around with that. If queen g8, knight d4, knight takes d4, pawn takes, queen c4, check. That's good. After knight takes d4, black could throw in a check here, but that doesn't do much. Okay, I'm going to go with this move. Queen g8 is correct. Okay, now take this guy. And problem solved. Weird. That was hard to anticipate. Black playing f5. Not sure how I feel about that, because on the one hand, I feel like maybe I should have seen that move, but I thought there was a decent chance the tactics trainer would play bishop h6, and I was just going to take on h7. But f5 is crafty, threatening bishop h6. So queen g8 just seems to take care of that issue. So the other line I was looking at was right here, just playing d3, letting black continue with their idea, bishop h6, and then giving up the queen for a modest material disadvantage in that sequence. But we have what? 3 minor pieces plus a rook for the queen, which is just a boatload of material. Black's got a couple extra pawns, but white should be better here. But I think queen g8 is much simpler. Yeah, and white will be up a rook and a piece. Or, sorry, just a piece after queen g8. For some reason, I thought we had 2 rooks for a second, but we only have 1. But yeah, queen g8 still seems easier. Cleaner idea. Cleaner solution. Okay, what's going on here? We can't take the rook on b6. We're pinned. We could take on f6 with check. But they could take with a rook, probably. What's up with this knight over here? That looks like a weird piece. Queen g2 almost wins that piece, but not quite. What about queen d8? That's kind of a cool move. That bishop's pinned, so he can't take our queen. We're also threatening to take here. And how does black cope? Queen d8, and then what? Because I think any rook move is bad. If he plays, let's say, rook b to c6, bishop takes f6, rook takes f6, queen takes c7, I think we should win that endgame with the c-pawn. Queen d7, or queen d8 rather. Queen d8, rook takes c5. I can take with the king and maintain that pin. Very important that I keep my bishop on d4. Looks good. I don't see a counter argument that black has. I'm not going to mess around with like queen g2 because knight g5 always takes care of business there. Okay, let's pull the trigger. Neat geometric move. And now just take c7. I think I could also consider taking with the pawn or even queen takes d4 check, but taking c7 is much easier. Yeah, let's just do that. Problem passed. Okay, so taking advantage of the pin. Just kind of a weird problem. I'm trying to think of some advice I could give for this one, but it's recognizing the pin and trying to play off that. Clearly, the bishop on d4 and the bishop on f6 and the black king on g7, that's a big part of this problem. And white doesn't have that many resources to attack with. That's the other thing. And I mentioned that if we trade immediately on f6, that's not going to bear any fruit because rook takes f6. Again, if queen g2 ever is played, knight g5 covers. Black probably wins in this case. So what else could it be? I mean, if we're not using the bishop and we can't move this pawn, can't capture on b6 because of the pin, it's got to be something with the queen. Only so many options. And it just happened to be queen d8. And any possible move of the rook entails some drawback, as I was describing. So if this, then take. And black's rook on c6 is overloaded. If he takes here, I take on c7. If black moves this rook, like rook here, then we can take on f6 as well. And now the c pawn is no longer pinned. Go take the rook. Cool problem. All right, pressing ahead. Which way are we going here? I had to stop and look at the letters and numbers. Sometimes with pawns and endgames, it's not apparent which way you're going, but black's pawns are going this way. So g2 is unplayable right now. Ah, maybe it is playable. g2, bishop takes g2, bishop to g3 check, skewering. That would just win. So g2, there's rook g8, but we queen. There's also g2, rook f8 check, but king g7, and we're also queening next move. Any other forcing moves? I don't think so. Straightforward. Yeah, skewer. So I arrived at the solution on this one in a weird way. So I mean, just looked at pushing the pawn first, and I didn't see that the bishop could take. Took me a split second to see that. And I didn't immediately abandon the line. Probably something also mentally cued me into looking at getting a dark square bishop on the same diagonal as white's king and rook. So the pawn is blocking that from happening right now, but if we get rid of the pawn, then we can pull it off. And the other line here was if rook g8 is played, then we can promote. White would have to give up the rook for the queen. And rook f8 check also doesn't derail us. We could just play king g7, attacking the rook and still threatening to promote the queen. We're going to do a couple more. So king g2. I need to get this bishop involved. So bishop c4 is screaming at me, setting up the threat of bishop f1. That's a mating net if we get to play that move. It also restricts white's queen. White doesn't have many checks they can throw at us. No good checks at all. This rook is so out of play. So if bishop c4, let's say queen e4. Bishop f1 check, king g1. Bishop to e2 check, king g2. Queen f1 check, king g3. Queen takes f3. Ah, no, he's covering f3. Where's the mate there? Just resetting my brain for a second. I could play queen g1. King f4, he's escaping. So bishop c4, queen e4, how am I mating him? Bishop f1, king g1. Bishop e2, king g2. Where's the mate? Bishop f1's a perpetual if I want it, but I want more. I want to go for the gusto. Checkmate, white. So queen f1, king g3, I just see him escaping, because he always holds f3, which is very annoying. Maybe that's the solution, though. Maybe we just have to go for a draw. We could also take the rook on h5, by the way. I should probably mention that, but I don't think that's the solution, because he can just take back with the pawn, and those h-pawns are a little dangerous. That just might be the solution. Go for the draw. Black is down some material, and as much as I'd like to mate with the queen and the bishop, sometimes you can't pull off a mate with that combo. Okay, so let's do this. Yeah, problem solved. This is another one where it maybe should go on a little bit further, but it didn't. Wait, did I just make a complete mental error? I thought white could jump over the bishop now. So in my head, I spent all this time looking at queen e4, and that move is just illegal right here. Oh, that's so weird. That happens every once in a while. I'm sorry that you guys had to endure that, me talking about queen e4 for like 2 minutes straight. That's like a classic visualization error, where the move is possible in the position that you're staring at. Like here, for where white's move, they could play queen e4. But of course, after bishop c4, that's ridiculous. But in my mind's eye, I had placed the white queen on e4, and I was trying to construct some mating net around that. But as played, it looks like black is just going to win, because if we explore this position, let's say white plays some move. I don't know what. Let's say rook here. Then we get this check. The king cannot go to g3 or h3, so king here. And now I think we're successfully winning the f3 pawn. Although even here, yeah, the queen still guards g4. So there's not a mate quite yet. This might win, though, in this case. Like take here, bishop d3 at the end, skewer and win. But maybe white has some way out of that if they can play a precise move here. It still looks very close to a mating net because white's queen is pretty useless. Could they play this, maybe? Trying to use the queen on the dark squares? Ah, no. Another thing I'm missing. Bishop h3 is just mate here at all times. I don't know why I was thinking the bishop had to go to e2, but boy. Bishop h3 checkmate. Yeah, controlling the g2 flight square. Okay. Well, it's probably good that I'm wrapping up in another problem or two, because my visualization skills on that one were lacking. All right, let's do 2 more. I'm going to put maximum effort into these last 2 problems. See what we can do. We already did this problem. Tactics trainer, why are you giving me a problem from earlier? This is the same exact position, right? Unless you're tricking me. So we got the same problem coming up again. That's very weird. Okay, we're not counting that one, obviously. Okay, here, knight f3 check, king f2. Almost wins the queen, but not quite. What about knight e2 check? They can take with a rook in that case. That doesn't work. Got to look at knight moves, especially the check ones, because those are so obvious and forcing. Okay. Knight f3 check, king f2, knight takes d2. Idea, if queen takes c5, we have knight e4 check. Backtrack with the knight and then win the queen. Very cute. Yeah, and if, after king f2, if they take with the knight, then rook takes d2. But this is the real key. The fork coming, and the knight doing all the hard work here in the problem. I like that one. So the original line I looked at here was like trading, taking on e3, king takes, and then just going for the rook on d2. But white escapes with an equal material situation after that. So we had to think creatively here a little bit. I mean, knight f3 is such a strong candidate move that I think you have to explore all the possibilities associated with that one. Knight e2 also jumps out because it is a check with the same idea, but rook takes e2 thwarts that, defending the queen. So I think you've got a strong candidate move here that you just have to pursue all the way to the end and consider some unusual resources, like the knight backtracking and getting the fork eventually, as played. So, and also with this, rook takes d2 check. and black will also be up a piece. Last problem. Okay, so the rook is hanging. Rook d2 check is not going to work because if king takes e3. If bishop takes f4, then I assume rook takes e3. Bishop takes f4, rook takes e3. Rook d2 check, rook e2 is blocking. Okay. We can play rook takes e1 first. Rook takes e1, king takes e1, bishop takes f4, rook takes f4, c2, rook c4, rook d1 check, followed by queen. That's got to be it. Yeah, I think that's going to be it. So not taking the knight first, taking the knight second. And if he takes the pawn there, we even have bishop d2. So here we play c2, drag the rook back over to stop, and then we have check followed by queen. Okay, pretty clear-cut sequence. So I knew the c-pawn would have something to do with this one. This is black's ace in the hole. And at first I was looking at bishop takes f4, but I didn't see a way around rook takes e3. If you were to play rook takes f4, then it would actually transpose to the solution. Take, c2, rook here, and give a check. But I didn't see a way around rook takes e3, whereupon this rook stands behind the c-pawn at all times. And rook d2 check, trying to force the king away from defending the rook, doesn't work because of rook e2. And white might even win. So, yeah, this is not going to cut it because the c-pawn is not dangerous enough. So switching up the move order, which is something by this point, if you've watched my videos and you solve tactics on your own, hopefully you're quite accustomed to. Switching up the move order is one of the biggest ways you can arrive at the solution in a tactical position. So your chess conscience will usually lead you to the right idea, and from there it can be a matter of just tweaking the move order and trying to perfect that idea. Okay, so a fairly successful session. We gained about 100 points. We got a repeat problem there at the end, which was kind of weird. Also, I made a couple visualization errors, especially with that problem a couple problems ago. Very strange, but that's going to happen. That happens to players of all levels. I remember Mikhail Tal relating a similar incident in his autobiography, which is a great book, by the way. So don't let that bother you if it happens to you. And I'm going to claim a little fatigue as well because it's shortly after midnight. But no, I'm fine. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll be climbing the rating ladder, the tactics training ladder, even further in the future. So hope everyone has a good week or is having a good week, and I will talk to you guys again soon. Bye.